Hello, awesome math students. We are starting Chapter 4, Rational Numbers, and we begin with Lesson 1. The I can statement is I can write fractions as terminating or repeating decimals, and write decimals as fractions. Notice the pencil sign. I want you to take notes of the vocabulary startup. We begin with repeating decimal, and that is a decimal form of any fraction. Now with a repeating decimal, we can also use what's called bar notation. Now this is a symbol that represents a repeating decimal. It's drawn only over the digits that repeat. Let's look at some examples. Do you see in this decimal we have 3's that are repeating? It's only the 3 that repeats. So this is a repeating decimal, and we can draw a straight line, that's the bar notation, and just write 3/10 repeating. In this example, notice how 1 and 2 are the digits that repeat. So we can simplify that repeating decimal by writing 12/100 repeating. Notice the bar notation above the 1 and the 2. And then finally, in this example, the only 2 digits that are repeating are the 8 and the 5. So we write the number with the bar notation above the 8 and the 5. Now, not all decimals repeat, so they are called terminating decimals. And that means that the repeating decimal is 0. Now, when we write 250, we typically don't write the 0, and instead, we would simplify it as 25/100. Notice the symbol at the top. I want you to listen and follow along, but you do not need to copy notes. Let's review what a fraction is and how we can write it as a decimal. Any fraction can be written as a decimal by dividing the numerator by the denominator. 2/9 is a fraction, the 2 is the numerator, and the 9 is the denominator. So when we write this up as a long division, we are dividing that numerator, the 2, by the denominator, 9. We read it 2 divided by 9. I like to put the decimal not only in that dividend, but straight up in the answer, which we call a quotient in division. Well, 2 cannot be divided into 9 groups, so we're going to write a 0. And then we're going to give ourselves a 0 in that tens place. We read it as 20. Well, 9 times 2 is 18, so I could have 2 groups of 9. 18, we subtract and we have 2. We give ourselves another 0 and bring it down, and we have 20 again, which means we are going to write another 2 in our quotient. It's going to continue to repeat. The digit that is repeating is the 2. So our answer is going to be 2/10 with that bar notation written above the 2. 2/10 repeating is how we read the answer. Let's try it again with 3/8. 3 is the numerator and 8 is the denominator. So when we write our long division, we are taking that numerator divided by the denominator. Let's put our decimal point and straight up in the quotient, and we can go ahead and we can put a 0 there as well. Well, 3 divided by 8, that's going to be 0 groups. But if we read it as 30 and we move to the tens place, how many 8s can fit into 30? And we would say 3. 3 times 8 is 24. We subtract, we have 6. So now we give ourselves a 0 in the next place value and bring it down 60. How many groups of 8 can fit into 60? And we would say 7. 7 times 8 is 56, and we subtract 4. Another 0 in the next place value, bring it down 40. How many groups of 8 can fit into 40? 5. It terminated because now the next digit that we would write would be a 0. Let's just see how that works. 5 times 8 equals 40. When we subtract, there's our 0. Instead of writing that in the answer, we are going to write our terminating decimal without a zero. 375 thousandths with no bar notation. It's your turn to try it. Change both of these fractions to a decimal by dividing the numerator by the denominator. If your answer ends with a zero, that is a terminating decimal. If a digit or digits repeat, use the bar notation for a repeating decimal. Go ahead and pause the video now, and then you can play again and we'll compare answers. All right, let's take a look at our division. 7 divided by 9 shows a repeating decimal, and the digit is 7 that repeats. So we just simplify our answer by using bar notation. We write 1 7 with the bar above, and we would read this number 7/10 repeating. 3 divided by 8 ended up with a 0. So instead of writing 0 after the 5, this is a terminating decimal, so we write 375 thousandths. Notice the symbol at the top. I want you to listen and follow along, but you don't need to take notes yet. We know that we can divide any fraction to change the fraction to a decimal. We also know that the decimal system is based on powers of 10, such as 10, 100, and 1000. If the denominator of a fraction is a power of 10, then you can use place value to write the fraction as a decimal. Let's take a look using these examples. If the fraction is 3/10, then we know that we have to place the 3 in the tenths place, and we would read it the same, 3/10. If the fraction is 3/100, then we know we have to place the 3 in the hundredths place value, and we would still read it the same, 3/100. 3/1000, we place the 3 in the thousandths place value, and we read it 3/1000. 7/10, same thing. We're going to place that 7 in the tenths place value. And 19/100, it has to sound the same when we read it. So we're going to put the 9 in the hundredths place and read it 19/100. 105/1000, 0, decimal point, 105. That 5 is in the thousandths place. We read the decimal 105 thousandths. Now, our symbol has changed, and I want you to write 3/25 as a decimal and 4/50 as a decimal. But both of these denominators are powers of 10. So it feels a little bit like a shortcut. We can multiply 25 times 4, and to keep these equivalent fractions, we're going to multiply the numerator by 4 as well. And here's what it does. 25 times 4 is 100. So now we have a power of 10 as our denominator. 3 times 4 is 12. 12/100ths, so much easier to change that fraction to a decimal. That 2 is in the hundredths place, and we read the decimal 12/100ths. We can do the same thing with 4/50ths. 50 times 2 equals 100. Now we want to write an equivalent fraction, so we're going to multiply the 4 times 2 as well. And 4 times 2 is 8. Our fraction is 8/100ths. So now we write our decimal with the 8 in the hundredths place, and we read it the same, 8/100ths. It's your turn to try it. Change each of these fractions to a decimal, but instead of dividing, we're going to use the powers of 10 in that denominator. If the fraction is a negative, remember that your decimal will be a negative, and that means you just have to put the negative sign in front of that decimal. Pause the video and then play it again when you're ready to check your answers. All right, let's check. -9/10. Well, 10 is a power of 10, so we know that we have to place the 9 in the tenths place. Remember the negative sign. We read it -9/10. 2/5. We can multiply 5 times 2, which gives us a power of 10. 2 times 2 is 4, so our fraction is equivalent to 4/10. 4 tenths. We place the 4 in the tenths place value. And negative 33 fiftieths. 50 multiplied by 2 equals 100. Oh, there's a power of 10. So negative 33 times 2 is negative 66. Negative 66 100ths. This 6 has to be in the hundredths place. Make sure you wrote your negative sign. Notice a symbol at the top. Want you to listen and follow along, but you don't have to take notes yet. Okay, a mixed number. Let's review what that is. We have a whole number and a fraction. That is a mixed number. So how do we change a mixed number to a decimal? Well, we have 3 and 1/2. Here's our 3 ones. The and is our decimal. And now we have that fraction, 1/2. 2 is a factor of 10. If we multiply it by 5, we can now write an equivalent fraction. 2 times 5 is 10. There's your power of 10. 1 times 5 is 5. So 1/2 is equivalent to 5 tenths. 5 tenths? Place the 5 in the tenths place value. So 3 and 1/2, a mixed number, is written as a decimal 3 and 5 tenths. But what if you have a mixed number 3 and 7/8? The denominator 8 is not a factor of 10 or 100 or 1,000, so we can't use the power of tens. But remember, any fraction can be divided. A numerator divided by a denominator, and that fraction will be written as a decimal. So 3 and 7/8. 3 and 7/8, we need to divide the numerator 7 divided by 8. Let's see. 8 times 8 is 64. 7 times 8 is 56. 5 times 8 is 40. Oh, there's that 0. We have a terminating decimal. 875 thousandths. So 3 and 7/8, a mixed number, is changed to a decimal. 3 and 875 thousandths. This time dividing numerator divided by denominator. Your turn to try it. Change each mixed number, whether it's negative or positive, to a decimal. Look at those denominators. Maybe you can use the power of 10. If not, no worries. You can divide any fraction to change it to a decimal. Pause the video and then play it again to compare answers. All right, let's look at our answers. Negative 4 and 4/25. 25 is a factor of 100. We can multiply by 4 to make 100. Multiply our numerators to get 16 100ths. Now remember to write the negative sign. 4 ones and 16 hundredths. The 6 is in the hundredths place. 7 and 1/3. Well, 3 is not a factor of 10, so we're going to divide our numerator divided by our denominator, and we get a repeating decimal this time. The digit 3 keeps repeating. So we have 7 ones, decimal point, and 3 tenths repeating using that bar notation above the digit that repeats. And finally, 2 and 1/20. 20 is a factor of 100. We can multiply by 5 to get 100. We can then multiply our numerator, and 1/20 is equivalent to 5 100ths. 5 100ths. 2 is how many ones we have. 2 and we have 5 hundredths. We put the 5 in the hundredths place. Oh, let's end with some math humor. Oh, here they come. This could be a problem. Ha 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 ha.